when you hit 30k, that's really when the race begins. You will be feeling tired at that point, no matter how fast you're running. It's going to be challenging. The marathon is my favorite distance. I really find it's just so special. You can be at your fittest on race day, but so many factors come into your actual performance. The reason why I did that race was also a bit of a competition with my dad, because he'd run that race 10 years prior. So
there's a lot of wanting to beat your dad here, Jasper.
Yes, yeah. Exactly, yeah. My name's Jasper. I'm 26 years old. I've been running for the past 10 years, and I'm also a running coach. Mainly do online training plans, but also coach a couple of groups locally. And so I like to run anything from the 1500 up to the marathon. I've ran a couple of ultras, but not really running too many ultras these days. I'm more focused on the sort of anything below the marathon. And I recently ran a PB in the marathon in Seville, running 2:23, and looking to try and get my 10k time down now. That's sort of my next kind of goal for this year. So it's I suppose a little bit about myself and who I am and what I do.
Take me back then, 10 years ago. You say you've been running for 10 years. When did you first lace up the trainers? What was the reasoning behind that? And take me kind of a little bit back in that running story, if you will.
Yep. So my dad's the one who got me into running. So this was when I was about 16 years old. I was playing lots of different sports, sort of team sports. I played rugby, I played football, basketball, a bunch of different sports. And my dad was training for this local race in Geneva, because I didn't mention that I live in Switzerland, in Geneva, and there's this local race that goes on every year just before Christmas. It's this huge race. Everyone shows up for it. It's called the Course de l'Escalade, and he was training for that. So it's it's quite an odd distance. It's 7.3 kilometers. But you do basically 3 laps around the old town in Geneva. So he was training for that. So he'd mapped out this loop starting from our house that was exactly 7.3 kilometers, so the distance of the race. And then one evening he said, "Oh, I'm just going to go for a training run now on this loop. Do you fancy joining?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? Surely I can run 7.3 kilometers." Never really run much before, but coming from team sports, you do lots of running and you have to still be pretty fit. So I joined him on this run, and it went well. I really enjoyed it and didn't feel too hard. And then so I started actually doing that run every week. So I do it sort of once a week on my own, and I really got into it. Just loved putting in my headphones, listening to music, and seeing I was actually getting quicker and quicker every time I did this loop. And so basically that's how I got into running. That's kind of how it all started.
When did that competitive switch get switched, though?
I'd say probably so when because I ended up running this race that my dad was training for. So at the time I didn't do the full distance. I did 2 laps, so it was just under 5k, and I came sort of in the top 20 or something in that race, and I thought that was pretty good because I was sort of looking at the times and the other runners, and I thought it was pretty good, and then that's sort of what kind of I think drove my competitiveness in races.
Was that kind of a bit of an eye-opening moment, like, oh right, I'm pretty good at this?
I suppose, yes, because before that I didn't really have anything to compare myself to. It was just sort of my own times, out running, and didn't really know what was a good time or a good average pace or so. But then during this race, I realized, there were actually 200 or 300 people running, and I was able to come in the top 20 or so. So I thought that was pretty good. So it kind of gave me an idea of sort of where I was at.
Let's talk about Seville then. Just coming off the back of that big PB and a half marathon PB as well, I believe, in the race, which is amazing to run a half marathon PB in a marathon. Let's talk about your marathon history first. When did you first toe the line for 42.2k, 26.2 miles? and what was that first race like, and how did that differ with standing on the start line of Seville?
So my first marathon was the Geneva Marathon in 2015, and that also the reason why I did that race was also a bit of a competition with my dad because he'd run that race 10 years prior. So
There's
he
a
ran
lot
it
of
in
wanting to beat your dad here, Jasper.
yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. So he ran the Geneva Marathon in 3 hours 14, and so I decided I was going to sign up for this race after having run for 2 years, and I thought I just set myself this goal of beating my dad's time, and so started training for that. And at the time I was 17, and they only let you run the marathon when you turn 18. And luckily, the day of the marathon was just a couple of days after my 18th
Oh,
birthday, so
amazing.
I was able to sign up and do that. So then, so this race was in May, so I started just followed this training plan online on the Nike training running app, and I followed this plan pretty well. I even sort of added more runs to it because I felt good, um, and so as I was training for this, I realized that the goal of 3:14 was probably going to be fairly easy. So I set myself changed my goal to breaking 3 hours, and and then actually before that I'd never run a half marathon in under 90 minutes. So
Okay.
it was going to be yeah, quite an ambitious goal. But I mean, I've done it in training. Broken the 90-minute barrier a few times. So I was fairly confident I could hold that for the full distance. And so I did this race and set off with the 3 hour pacing group, just thinking I'd just stick with them and run to the finish. But already sort of 10 miles in, I felt really good and decided to break away from the pack, and ended up actually running a negative split and ran 2:54 for that race. So also getting a half marathon PB in the second half. So yeah, it's,
It feels like we've got this is going to have to be an ongoing thing here, Jasper. Half
I think
marathon
so.
and half marathon PBs.
Yes.
So standing on the start of Seville, then what was the feeling like? Obviously, it's a good few years ago that now to where we are now, but what are the lessons that you've learned over the marathon over that time, and where was your headspace standing on the start of Seville?
So going into Seville, I also had a pretty ambitious goal of trying to break 2:20, and so previously I'd ran my PB was in Berlin just last year, so around 2:23, and I thought I could. Um, I thought the training had gone pretty well over the winter, and I just had this as my sole focus. First race of the year, yeah, this was really my sort of A goal, and put in a lot of training miles, um, specific long runs, and I knew in training that sub 2:20 pace did feel quite tough and challenging. But I always knew that in a race, it's always different. It always doesn't feel the same as in training. And I knew, Seville is the fastest marathon in Europe, so that would help a lot. And so I just told myself I'd go out in at sub 2:20 pace, um, and then prior to this race I'd never broken 70 minutes for a half, so my PB was 70 minutes and 5 seconds. So I thought first goal was to break 70 in the half and then try and hold on. And it was going well until 25K, and that's when I fell off the pack. And um, it's because I saw that the pace was getting quicker, and I thought that I wasn't going to be able to hold on. And I think that was a mistake. I really think I should have just not really cared about what the splits were, and just tried to hold on to the pack as long as I could, because then running alone is a lot harder, I find, than running with a pack. So I think that's definitely something that I've learned from running marathons, is that it does help to be surrounded with others and not run it alone. So even if there's a group that's a little bit faster, a little bit slower, it does help to sit with the pack rather than try and run alone. Yeah.
When do you reflect? Like, you've obviously got those reflections now from within the race, but do you reflect straight away when you cross the line? Do you take some time and then reflect? How does that kind of work?
So I think in the days afterwards, that's definitely when I reflect the most on, especially for a marathon, and sort of try and think through the race and what went well, what didn't go so well, and what I can learn from that to go into the next one. And I think this time around, I realized that my goal was quite ambitious, really, to go from 223 high to 219. Um, it's I probably should have taken off a smaller chunk, maybe gone 222, 221, because I'm sure if I'd gone out at sort of that pace, it would have been a lot easier in the second half. Um, but but again, I didn't. But I set this goal, and I really wanted to try and go for it. That's really what was motivating me in training, was to try and get to that sort of fitness level. And um, but now I know going into the next one, I probably won't go out so fast, and really, because I know how, after running so many marathons, I know how I should feel in the first half. And this in this race in Seville, it definitely felt harder than it should have. Um, Even sort of 10K into it, I was already doubting myself, thinking I'd gone off a bit too hard. So I'll know that going into the next one, yeah, definitely I should listen to my body, and if the pace feels too hard at the start, just ease off a little bit, and definitely make the second half feel yeah, a lot better than it did in Seville.
It's so easy to put yourself in a hole, isn't it? In a marathon, like you just mentioned, like the first 10K felt maybe harder than it should have. And then you start telling yourself, oh no, oh no, and then it's kind of all downhill from there. It's like really hard to get a ladder to get out of that hole because it just keeps getting bigger.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, just from experience, like I really know, the first 10K should really feel like the warm up. You shouldn't feel like you're pushing and trying to hold on to the pace. Um, and yeah, even if that means going out a little bit slower than planned, it's going to save you for later on in the race, definitely.
It's quite interesting hearing you say about kind of setting smaller goals, going like from 223 high down to maybe 222 or 221, rather than jump in, below that obvious barrier of sub 220. Was it a perspective change having to kind of realize this is minute amount of time I'm taking off each time now, rather than, from your first marathon, 254, I would imagine there were some pretty big jumps in that journey down now to where you're now thinking about 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. Was that a bit of a shift?
I think so. Because yeah, you're right. Going from 254, my next one was 249, then 246, and 240. So I was making these big jumps. And you can do that sort of, when you've run your first few ones, and but then as you get quicker, you do have to kind of shift your perspective, and instead of thinking about taking off 5 minutes, maybe go a minute at a time, or even a few seconds.
Yeah.
Because yeah, even up until now, so my last jump from I went from 227 to 223, so I was still making these big jumps. But I think now, as I'm just getting closer and closer to my best sort of time, I'm probably gonna have to take smaller chunks off. Yeah, because I can't just keep on taking 5 minutes off every marathon forever.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
There's going to be some world records broken, Jasper, if that happens. I really love your Instagram, and obviously following the journey and kind of the posts that you've done post Seville has been really nice, kind of really summed up that race. So if anybody's listening to this and they are interested in delving into it a bit more, definitely go and check out Jasper's Instagram. What I also love is kind of the coaching hat that you put on there a lot of the time. And I know there'll be a lot of people listening to this now that maybe are looking forward to in the UK, Manchester or London, obviously in April, what would you consider kind of best practices pre-marathon? So let's go maybe week leading up and then day of. What would you consider kind of the best practices, things that have worked for you in the past?
So definitely the week of, you don't want to be doing much running at all. You know, it's really the last phase of the taper. You really want to get to the race feeling, feeling fresh, feeling ready to run. And it's arguably the hardest part of training is to really cut back and you should be feeling that hunger, that energy building up before the race. So that's completely normal. I'd say also that can lead to a bit of maybe pre-race anxiety or maranoia, as some people like to call it. Um, but I think the best thing to do in that case is to really trust the process and look back over the weeks and the months of hard work you've been putting in, and it's really an important part to rest really before the race. It can be tempting to maybe add on a few miles here and there to your runs, but really in that last week, I really like to think less is more. So it's all about lifting your foot off the gas and really trying to sleep more, trying to bank more sleep throughout the week as well. It's very important because chances are the night before the race you're going to feel a bit of a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress, and you might not sleep as well. But if you've already banked some good sleep throughout the week, it's not going to make a difference if you've slept less than you normally would on the night before the race. So that's something that's important to do. And then as well, with food, just I like 2 or 3 days before, I'll start to just increase the amount of carbohydrates I eat, and then reduce fiber, foods that are high in fat. Really want to be eating as much, as many carbs as you can. Ideally, more sort of refined carbohydrates, more the white rice, your white pasta, white breads, just to really reduce the amount of fiber you're eating. 'Cause, that can lead, in the race, can lead to GI issues or unwanted toilet stops. Um, so, so yeah, that's really what I focus on in the week leading up to the race.
And then where's your head at on the start line? What are those marathon day of practices that you put yourself through?
Yeah, so day of the start line, I always like to wake up with plenty of time before the race, just so I can go to the toilet, have my breakfast with enough time before the race to digest, and then just make sure that I'm awake and ready to go at the start line. Always like to get to the start line, plenty of time to spare, to drop my bag off, to make sure I'm getting into the right starting pen. Just give yourself a little extra time just in case the bag drops maybe a little further away than you expected, or in some races you have to drop your bag off at a certain time before the race starts, and then depending on where you're running, it could be cold, so you want to bring extra layers to wear. And a lot of the time, big marathons will have these big bins where you can throw your extra clothes away to donate them to charity. So you can keep them on until almost right before, even in the starting pen before the race starts. So you stay nice and warm. You don't want to get cold before the race starts. And then just I like to sort of chat to others around me and see if people are sort of going for the same times as me, and see if I can sort of uh, get to know them and try and run with them for a bit at the start. And then just trying to relax, stay calm, trust the training, and just wait for the gun to go, and then you're off.
We've spoken about that first 10K. Let's break the marathon distance down into maybe 4 sections: first 10K, second, third, and fourth. Just give me kind of like a place where you hope to be at in those sections. So we've already done first 10K, feels like a warm up, feels like it should be easy. Where are you at second 10K, third and fourth, and then that final 2K into the finish?
So ideally in the second 10K, you've already warmed up, you're feeling good. That's the kind of time to hold back. I think a lot of people will, want to pick the pace up already in the second 10K because they're feeling good. You're trying to get to halfway and you might want to pick up the pace a little bit, but the idea is to stay relaxed, hold back, and you want to breeze through the first half, feeling comfortable, and then that sort of halfway mark will give you an idea of sort of what time you're on for the full distance. But again, that's not halfway. I mean, in terms of effort, the effort that comes a lot later. So when you go past halfway, that third 10K from 20 to 30, it should start to feel a bit more challenging. Your legs might feel a bit heavier. Breathing rate might start to increase a little bit. But again, you've got to stay relaxed and really try and focus, try and wake up because yeah, the first half you want to almost be kind of asleep and just ticking off the kilometers, miles, without really thinking about it. And then as you get into that third 10K, you really want to be waking up and focusing a bit more on the effort and your pace. And then when you hit 30K, that's really when the race begins. You will be feeling tired at that point, no matter how fast you're running. It's going to be challenging. So you really have to dial in, and really that last 10K is going to be the hardest. But that's what you've been training for. That's what the marathon is. So you really have to really release everything you've got and really dial in and it's going to hurt. You've got to accept the pain and push through it, and that every kilometer you tick off is one step closer to the finish. And then you get to 40K and you're almost done. It's the last 2K, the final stretch. You've really kind of just got to give everything you have left, empty the tank, and just get to that finish line. Try not to focus on pace, or it's going to feel hard. It's going to hurt. Your body will be screaming at you that to stop, to slow down. That you just got to ignore that and just focus on getting to the finish line, and then you can relax and celebrate.
Why do you keep going back, Jasper? Why do you keep signing up for races? Because you've well beaten your dad by this point. What's the reasoning that you keep going back, keep towing these start lines?
Well, I love the whole journey of training and improving on my own times. So yeah, right now it's I think not really competitive with my dad anymore. It's really with myself that I'm trying to be competitive, and I just love putting in the hard work and training and having that pay off on the race during the race, and just like seeing that improvement and just seeing how far I can get and how fast I can get. Well, I don't really like to set limits to myself. I just want to really see what I can achieve, and if I really believe I can do something, and I'm sure I can do it. I just put in the hard work and execute on race day.
And what is next in terms of marathons? Have we got another marathon booked? I know you've mentioned dropping that 10K time a bit before in this conversation, but is there another marathon coming up at some point?
So I'm signing up for London Marathon in April. So that's in, I don't know now, 7-8 weeks time. And after that, I'll be doing Valencia Marathon in December. So the idea for London Marathon is not really to do another marathon training cycle. It's just to sort of carry the fitness I've sort of banked from Seville Marathon into London. And then I've got a few 10Ks I'm going to do in between then, just to try and work on a bit of speed. But then coming to London, hopefully with a bit less pressure than Seville, and maybe go out a bit slower, sort of see what I can achieve at London, and then the idea will be over the summer to work on my speed do a bit of a track season, so really work on my 1500-meter time up to sort of 5,000, 10,000 meters, and then go into another full marathon training cycle for Valencia at the end of the year.
I feel like I might know the answer to this question, but have you got a favourite distance? We've spoken about 1500 all the way up to marathon. Is marathon that number one, or is there something else that you prefer, or are they all different?
They're all different. They're all hard. I think any distance is hard when you really push yourself to your max. But I'd have to say that the marathon is my favorite distance of them all. I really find it's just so special. You can be at your fittest on race day, but so many factors come into your actual performance. You've got the nutrition side, you've got hydration, and then just the psychology as well of running for that long and pushing your body to its absolute limit. I find it's just such a special distance, and yeah, it's definitely the marathon for me.
It's mad. I was speaking to somebody about this the other day. Like, it's such a perfect distance in the way that it's so brutal. 26.2 miles. Like, imagine if a marathon was just 22 miles. Imagine the times people would be thrown out if it was just like 22, 23 miles. It's something about that last, 8 to 10K that just is just brutally beautiful, was the way that it was described to me. And I don't know what it is about that. You can't really put your finger on it, but for some reason that last 8 to 10K, that's what makes it, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. And it's something that's really hard to replicate in training, and you really can only experience it in the race itself. So that's why when you're on your first one, it's always a special one because you really don't know what to expect in that last 8 to 10K. But then after doing a couple of them, you realize that that's really what you're training for is that last section, and that's really what makes or breaks your race. So you've really got to dial in and focus on that last part.
And we'll finish with this, Jasper, but there will be people listening to this, and you mentioned first race, then there will be people listening that maybe are doing their first race in London. Maybe they are doing their first race towards the end of the year at Valencia or Berlin. Like, what would be your one piece of advice, if you could only pick one, that you would give somebody toeing the line of a marathon for the very first time?
I would say nutrition is very important, and don't underestimate your nutrition strategy during a race. It's something you should have practiced in training beforehand. So whether you use gels, sports drinks, energy bars, whatever it is, just make sure you've practiced it, and it's nothing new you're doing on race day. And yeah, you may think you can sort of get away with taking one or two gels throughout the race, but really you should be aiming for at least 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So most people that should be a gel every 30 minutes. And yeah, also just you want to practice everything from just carrying your gels, or if you know that the course will have a specific brand of gels that they give out, make sure you've practiced taking those on your long runs. I'd say that's really what's going to prevent you from bonking in the last 10K. So make sure your nutrition plan is on point.